All right, we are about to get started. Let me just make sure my page is all loaded and we are ready to go. So, um, as we let everybody get logged on, I know there's a couple people signing on live. I'm just going to go ahead and share what I am talking about today in this video, which is why it is so hard to really streamline your language therapy and what really needs to happen in order for language therapy to be effective, because a lot of it is not actually about what happens in the therapy room. It's about what happens before you get to the therapy room. So there are a couple key things that need to happen in order for what you do in therapy to actually make a difference, and also what happens after therapy. So I wanted to walk through some of those today because a lot of times we massively downplay the importance of these things. And I wanted to share how you can solve this problem if you feel like you're kind of overwhelmed and not getting the results that you want. So there are actually three key steps to an effective language therapy session. So step number one is that you need to know the evidence. Step number two is that you need to pick from that evidence and translate it into an effective therapy session. So you've got to interpret it and then actually figure out how to make that actionable. And then number three is that you actually need to deliver the session. So let's break those three steps down and talk about why it makes it hard to actually implement effective strategies. So let's talk about step number one, which is that you need to know the evidence. Well, that is actually no small task. There are thousands of research articles out there. There are a bazillion discussion groups, a lot of comments, a lot of opinions. And if you actually have tried to keep up with the research and tried to stay up to date with all the different journal articles that are coming out, you know that as a full-time therapist, that can be really hard. And it can be really hard to stay on top of everything and to be constantly reviewing those articles. So the problem is that just that step alone takes a lot of work. Now, of course, there are different ways that we can be aware of what the evidence is without actually having to do all of the research on our own. And that is obviously by developing ourselves and taking continuing education or taking different courses and programs that essentially curate that content for you so that they funnel it down and you don't necessarily have to do all of it on your own and really start from scratch. So if you opt to go that route, it does streamline those things. But again, you have to figure out what programs are right for you and which one is going to curate the right type of content for your particular caseload. So that's step number one. And as you know, that can be very time consuming to try to sift through all that research on your own. And there's a lot of guilting and shaming that goes on with clinicians where they are made to feel bad if they're not spending hours and hours digging through research. And the truth is that's just not feasible for a clinician who has a full-time or even a part-time caseload. So let's go on to step number two, which is after you figure out what the evidence is and what the research actually is suggesting we should do, you have to take from that and actually translate that, sift through the research, figure out which is legit and which isn't. And then you have to figure out how to translate that into a bunch of different research-based activities. So you have to figure out, okay, what this article says this, how does this technique actually work? And what materials do I need? What stuff do I need to gather in order to actually be ready to make that into a manageable therapy session? So, as you know, that is also no small task. A lot of times when you read research or even when you go to a seminar, there aren't a lot of things that are actually actionable. So what happens is that you have to spend all of that time trying to figure it out on your own. It's not very helpful if people just kind of vomit all this information at you, but then never actually do the work in telling you how to implement that. But unfortunately, it does happen all the time, not always due to the fault of the people giving the presentations, but more about the model in which a lot of professional development works. A lot of times we go to a day-long seminar, we go to a conference and they have an hour or 2 hours or whatever to give you all this information that's in their head. And a lot of times it's just not enough time and they can't necessarily offer that follow-up support. So unfortunately, it leaves you with a lot of work to do. It puts a lot of work on the clinician to actually interpret that information and translate it into a therapy session. So let's talk about the next issue. We've got know the evidence, be able to translate the evidence into an activity, but then we haven't even gotten to the therapy session yet. And just those two things have taken a lot of time and energy, and you're probably exhausted already. Then you've got to sort through all those different techniques and that research and figure out, okay, for these kids, this session, what do I do? And you've got to sort through all of that. So it's no wonder that a lot of us feel overwhelmed. It's not that we don't have enough information out there and enough research out there. We have too much. And so those are a lot of choices. It's actually harder to make a choice and to streamline things when we have too many choices, because that can be really overwhelming. So we've got to funnel it down. And then now that we're totally exhausted, we haven't even gotten to the therapy room yet. Now you have to actually go be present for your students and deliver an effective session. And then of course there are some things that you have to do after the session to follow up and things like that. So that is why why it is so hard for SLPs to be effective in language therapy, because those are the three things that actually need to happen, and they can be extremely overwhelming. So here's the thing that a lot of people don't realize is that a lot of times people are always looking for more. Like people are dumping more information on us, and then there's more products that we have to sift through. And then we go to a conference and there are more flashcards to pick from, and we just keep adding more and more and more. And that's actually cluttering our lives and our therapy room. And now we have more to sift through. So it's harder to make a choice about what to do next. But what we actually need to do, what actually allows you to be effective, is have fewer choices. So the way that you can cut through that overwhelm is, number one, yes, finding a go-to source and finding a way that you can get that information about knowing the evidence curated for you, so you don't have to sift through it on your own, so that it can be compiled for you. And then instead of having a bazillion strategies, you simply want to have a couple different go-to strategies that you can use for the key concepts that you need to target for your students. Not more, but actually less. And when you can do that within a system, what that allows you to do is get through steps 1 and 2. So knowing the evidence, because you've got these staple strategies that actually align with the evidence, and then picking from those strategies efficiently so that you're not spending a ton of time in step 2, which is figuring out the implementation part. So when you can go through steps 1 and 2 efficiently, that way when you actually show up for step 3, which is to be present for your students, you can actually be present for them and do a good job with your therapy, figure out how to scaffold, and then have some time left over to do other things above and beyond that you might want to do for your students that you maybe aren't able to do right now because you're in the weeds with all of the planning and those things that I mentioned. So that is the key. The key to solving this problem of overwhelm is having less, not more. Really funneling down the amount of strategies that you use so that you know that they're linked up with the evidence, so that it's easier to pick what to do next, and having a system that answers the question of where do I go next with these students, and what do I do, and how do I do it? When you have that, what that allows you to do is be much more efficient and effective at the same time. And you are effective not just because you're aligned with the evidence, but also because you are actually have energy, and you actually are able to perform better as a therapist because you are rested and recharged. It allows you to conserve your cognitive energy so that you can think of new ideas, so that you can figure out ways to manage your therapy sessions rather than always feeling burnt out. So with that being said, I actually, if you're watching this video on my Facebook page, I will link below. And if you're watching this in my Facebook group, I'd love to hear your comments in the chat on all the things that I've talked about. But in my Facebook group, Effective Language Therapy for SLPs, I talk about the systems that will allow you to do what I've mentioned in this video, which is really create efficient systems that allow you to focus on those key skills that are important for our students. One of the key things that's going to help you create a system is figuring out what skills are important to target that will improve overall language processing and academic skills. So in my Effective Language Therapy for SLPs Facebook group, I share information, resources, and lead discussions on these topics. So I'll share a link below this video so you can join me in that Facebook group. But if you're watching this video in the Facebook group, I'd love to hear your comments below. So thanks so much, everybody, for watching.